So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's a pleasure to gather here for the second edition of Tales of Superstition and Magic with an artist that's been an inspiration for thinking about this subject for a few years now for everyone in the arts community, I think. So we're very happy to welcome to LUMA the artist Tai Shani. Thank you so much, Tai, for joining us. I'm going to just give a brief introduction of Tai's practice, and then we're going to get into the conversation. Behind me, there are a few images which will just show you during the conversation. I can take it if you prefer, Tai. I'm just going to say a few words about Tai's practice. So, Tai, your practice spans performance, film, photography, installation with experimental writing as a guiding method. Your work often unfolds in clusters, so multi-layered universes developed over several years through exhibitions, performances, books. Two of the densest of these constellations are DC Productions and the Neon Hieroglyph, both extending across several formats, mediums, and venues. DC Productions began in 2015 and gained vast critical acclaim, notably after exhibitions at the Tetley and Glasgow International in 2018. And then in 2019, you published Our Fatal Magic, which is this book I have right here. And in the same year, you were one of the 4 joint Turner Prize laureates. Your work has since been widely exhibited in the UK and internationally. I'm not going to cite all of the exhibitions because we won't have the time, but you've had numerous solo exhibitions, most recently at the High Line in New York, at Somerset House in London, and in 2024 at the Cosmic House in London and Gio Marconi in Milan, and over the last decade, multiple solo exhibitions worldwide. So in Madrid at Centro in the UK at the Serpentine and Tate, but also in Switzerland and Holland, in many other countries, and your work is also collected in major private and public collections. In France, more recently, your work has been presented at Suzanne Tarasiev in Paris in 2025, and in the group exhibitions Échelle Humaine at Lafayette Anticipation in Paris and Scabs at Mécène du Sud, closer to here in Montpellier. Since this year, you are visiting professor at the Royal College of Arts. And you are frequently described as one of the most influential artistic voices in the UK today. You are a builder of worlds, maker of images and possibilities. And across all of these projects, your practice has begun to form a kind of speculative constellation with sculpture, performance, film, and writing orbiting around one central impulse, as you describe it, to expand the feminist history of imagination as a site of political, emotional, and historical inquiry. And each project seems to begin with a set of questions which are never fully resolved, but always destabilizing, generative, and deeply rooted in the feminine experience. You approach these questions through different figures, which we're going to go through a bit today, who are at once mythic and intimate. So in your work, we can meet mystics, ghosts, witches, algorithmic muses, sleepers who resist the violence of the so-called real world. And your language and imagery reclaim exaggeration, excess, and the irrational as feminist methodologies. So since we don't have the day, I propose that we just go through maybe 3 major projects. DC Productions, which is a cornerstone of your speculative feminist world making, the Neon Hieroglyph, which focuses on ergot and witchcraft, and finally my Bodily Remains, your Bodily Remains, and all the bodily remains that ever were and ever will be, which is a meditation on revolutionary love and the ghosts of resistance. And these will help us, I hope, collectively trace how your relationship to magic and speculation has shifted in recent years. After this longish introduction, we can get into the first question. And maybe let's begin with DC Productions, which is this very ambitious multi-layered project developed over several years and draws from Christine de Pisan's The Book of the City of Ladies, which was written in the 14th century. Could you tell us more about this adaptation as a way to enter into your practice and how you approached it?
So prior to this large kind of project, I had been doing little adaptations. I find it quite generative to have a holding pattern for a lot of chaos that is in my mind. And at the time, I was doing little performances here and there. I'd get a little bit of money to make a film. So I started building these characters. I knew that I wanted to work towards something that was a kind of Gesamtkunstwerk, a big project that had like multiple kind of facets to it and iterations, but I needed to build it through the kind of means that I had at my disposal at the time. I came across Christine de Pizen's book because I was looking at medieval mysticism at the time and someone recommended it to me. And I was very kind of taken by it, but also I knew that it wasn't going to be a straight adaptation and that the adaptation would be quite experimental. But there were certain cornerstones in her book that I found really relevant to how I wanted to kind of expand. I mean, who am I to expand on her book, but to like travel from her book, let's say. So in the book, she builds a city of women, and the bricks of the city, this allegorical city that she builds, are actually the stones are women themselves, and I quite liked the idea of a structure that was also like bodily, and it felt to me like a very contemporary kind of conception of feminist speculative writing at that moment. So I kind of took that, and also I really liked the way that mythological and real characters kind of occupied the same terrain and weren't hierarchized as one being real and one not, but they both held the same kind of power and function. So I took those two things mainly and wrote this adaptation that was a city. I called it a city in time and not in space because the imagination is a temporal technology, really. And I wanted to have this expanded space that could also continue to grow in the mind of the person who experienced the work and their own interpretation of it, really. So I created 12 characters, and it culminated in 2018 in the first slide that you showed, which was 12 performances over 4 days. 7.5 hours of monologue, unfortunately. And the monologues became the book Our Fatal Magic, yeah.
And when you talk about Christine de Pizan, I think it's also important to say that you have been very much inspired by contemporary feminist writing as well, speculative. So you've talked about being inspired by, for example, Ursula K. Le Guin or Octavia Butler. So I think it's also interesting to maybe understand how you merge maybe the contemporary speculative feminist writing that seems to be very also structuring in your practice, and this kind of very ancient reference.
Well, that's what's quite interesting about the world, is that many things don't change so much, and that actually, if you look at the writing of medieval mystics, it is very much like speculative contemporary fiction. If you think of it outside of the context of the conversations being about Christ, but you take them to be about an ineffable or a divine experience beyond language, it becomes something else. So I think I don't make like Christine de Pizan, I don't make those distinctions so much. And also, I think the politics of revolution and emancipation also don't change. The demands of equality remain as they are always, in a strange way. So I think for me, those boundaries aren't as kind of clear cut. And the way that I write, probably, as an artist, I don't have much control over what I do. I think it's really important to say that. And I think that is also part of the magic of art making, is that you surrender to a process to a degree. So you can build a kind of arena, but what happens in it sometimes is a little bit elusive, So I think the writing also, I was obviously very, very influenced by contemporary thinkers and teaching at the time, conversations with students, and it kind of came together in that way, I think.
In DC, your characters speak from deep times, dark ages, end times, and there is a kind of a temporal swirl in your that you just mentioned, also a specific relationship to time. Could you expand a bit on that, and also maybe explain how magic functions or allows you to maybe explore different relationships to time?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a suspicion around linearity, I guess, and it never felt like a very productive line of inquiry when looking at anything to think of it linearly. I really enjoy also bringing these different anachronisms together and see what affects they bring. So I'm very interested in affective registers in the work, and I guess temporal states really, have that kind of quality of something from, writing about like a German revolutionary from the 70s has a different kind of timbre than writing about, a contemporary kind of thing or something from the 1800s. So I really enjoy bringing those different affective dimensions together and seeing what happens and how they kind of react together as well. But also before this project, just to say, like, I didn't go to art school, so I never really had the opportunity to decide what my work was about. It was a process of kind of figuring it out to a great degree. And before these projects, I was very much interested in fiction and time and narrative and what happens to unobserved fictions. So also a lot of that has remained as like threads, this kind of idea of a collapse of time, or what happens when time has no observation point. And I think it's a maybe semi-spiritual position on time, I guess, that we're in some kind of very subjective experience of it, but that everything's there all the time, all at once, maybe.
That's also something that I felt was very present in the book, Our Fatal Magic, because during all of those years of working on DC productions, you had this writing practice, which then became this book, published in 2019. Maybe the best way to give us a sense of what it is that you read maybe an excerpt.
Okay. I have some here, printed big, which is very good these days. So I'll read to you like a refrain that happens at the beginning of the 12 episodes, and every episode starts with the same invocation. This is my fatal magic. Okay, the first cut is the deepest. Deep times in dark ages, end times, much time ago, beyond the burning witch, silicon and engine, settlement and temple, beyond ape, beyond synthetic ape, beyond flesh or smooth fin or scale or feather, before cell, after self-generating cell and spangle of mica, then mica, before the white dove rushing into the age of love, then stardust in the light-headed totality of a bloody dimension ruthlessly cut into the real, to where it grew sticky and sweet like you, past the slick and palpitating glaze, before echoes echo, where breathless together we phosphoresce, there where the black of end times and the pure lux of in the beginning, we gently touch in an immutable, eternal, hologramic kiss. I have lived a good life, we declare in our beautiful telepathic hive mind, and we too kiss, partly formed and spectral, nipples rock hard and dripping wet, with peaked sentience in our girlhood beds. We are the technology, and we are the medium. We are the flesh, and we are the touch. We are the eye, and we are the vision. I met Rachel by the river. She was a lot older and dirty and lonely. The rain made a crust over the sand that broke away under my little feet as I walked towards her. She was scared and had known real terror. By the water there grew a strange otherworldly flower with a thick succulent stalk. It seeped sticky fluid all over our hands when we tore it off. This bright flower brought divinity to us. We walked home hand in hand like small gods, still alone and in danger.
Thank you, Tai. I think what's a bit, I think, striking when we go through our fatal magic is that it has this very porous kind of non-linear quality and also non-heroic. We don't just follow a character that, as if kind of magic shapes almost the architecture or the way that you kind of weave through the content. And it's also very interesting to read while we experience the sculptures, the installations, the video work, the performances. So how do you kind of work through that? Like really concretely, how does writing like works with all of the other mediums? How do those characters kind of come to life, or not necessarily characters, but motifs? And how do you kind of create, that very impressive conversations between these different like aspects of the work?
I try. I don't know if I succeed, because I don't think I can say that there's anything minimalist about what I do, but I do try and leave space for the viewer, their interpretation and their encounter with the work. That's something that's very important to me. So even though on one hand, we're seeing images now, and like, for example, here it looks very full, but actually it's very still and it's difficult text, and people have to really submit also to the process of what's happening. I feel in my lifetime I want to always be a novice, so I also try continually to use different mediums, try different things, and that's also part of it, is finding new ways to express some of these ideas and feel what is the appropriate way for each thing. I mean, and also things change. So like, for example, Our Fatal Magic is a very bodily book, and someone wrote on, I don't know if you guys know what Goodreads is, but it's a terrible website where people review books, and someone said that it was like a slimy, gory story about people that want to fuck each other or something like that. And that was awful. and like, in a way, it was very much for me a moment where I had discovered feminism. I grew up in a time that felt very in the thrall of patriarchal conceptions of self and femininity. And I was interested in writing through the body at that time. And by the end of the project, I wasn't anymore. And also I wasn't interested in kind of exploring, both typical and extraordinary trauma around sexual trauma, gender trauma. Those were things that felt very urgent to me in that moment to kind of articulate. And by the end of 4 years or 5 years working on the project, having lots of conversations with people about subject positions, about what is a voice in the world, why does it matter, about essentialism, about gender essentialism. I really changed my focus, and I felt like I don't feel like this is something I'm interested in pursuing further. I mean, I still enjoy writing in great detail about gore, but also the conditions of the world have really changed, and I don't, we're confronted every day with images that are world-shattering from the genocide. I don't feel like a need to write about violence in that way, in this kind of distanced way, as something that happens in an elsewhere that is inaccessible to us. Yeah.
And also, it looks like maybe when you started working on DC productions, it was in 2015, and in the last 10 years, kind of the feminist conversation has been so rich, and also has many things shifted. And so it's also interesting to maybe look back and see that there were some still very strong and powerful intuitions in that work that I feel also continue in parts of the works that you do today. Mm-hmm. But that were kind of there was something also very kind of queer about the way that you spoke about bodies, even if it was very kind of incorporated in a very specific bodily experience. It didn't seem, at least to me, as as something that wasn't fluid, that wasn't open.
For sure. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, that was also part of what I wanted to present, with the book, was to have these ideas like be kind of dismantled about like how our bodies are constituted and what their relationship that has with our gender. That was a very important thing to me. But I think that as a kind of focal point, I became more interested in, I guess, what people call a kind of more intersectional understanding of feminism as part of a multiple organism that, is against oppression and not as a singular thing. I mean, it's basic to say, but they're patriarchal women. Women don't automatically sit outside of that system. They're capable of enacting horrific patriarchal violence as well. So I think my understanding of these things, like it was a process for me, and I understand the world through my work. So it also like changed me, thank God. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So perfect transition. Maybe, moving on to the next project is the
That's
Neon.
Still in the.
It's still in DC, still 2019. Very beautiful, vivid colors and images. Do you want to speak maybe about the hand, just because it's such a recurrent?
Yeah, I do have an answer finally. I mean, I think it's a symbol of touch, basically, for me, and of labor, of working, of making things. I make everything in the studio, and the materiality of the work is very important to me.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the Neon Hieroglyph, which is the second kind of multi-layered also project that I wanted us to kind of discuss today, notably because you kind of change focus, and I think it's very kind of visible. So it's kind of a project about an ergot, and you'll tell us more about that, about why kind of focus on that. And you also dive into kind of both an ecological kind of relationship also to the world, which is much more explicit. And then there's this question of psychotropic and more like beyond kind of real experiences, which are also linked to fungus and the use of like some substances. So could you talk us maybe through that, and also through the way that you work through that in the transition to the Neon Hieroglyph?
Yeah. So obviously, well, not obviously to me in hindsight, at the end of that project, I was in a bit of a kind of crisis as to how to come out of it, and also to. It was a very comfortable space because the city holds everything. It's a kind of the ultimate manifestation of our imprint on the world as a species, as the city has civics, it has everything's in there. So it could potentially also be eternal as a project, like it could be about a conversation in the city, and I didn't want to rely on that as a kind of crutch for myself. So I discussed this with my analyst a lot. I'm in Lacanian analysis for many years. And I decided I needed to move away from it. But I wanted to see what were the things that I found were not resolved, that had just been touched upon very lightly in the DC project, and that were still like compelling to me, basically. And I wanted to talk about psychedelics. So the first thing I did was I looked up, someone had told me about an acid commune in Italy that was all women. And I was like, that sounds interesting to me. So I Googled like Italy, acid, LSD, women or something like that. And this news article came up about an island called Alicudi, where they had an outbreak of ergot contamination that supposedly lasted 450 years. But maybe I should say what ergot is first. Exactly. Ergot is a fungus that grows on multiple grains, and before industrial milling, people used to eat those grains quite often. So like dancing plagues in the Middle Ages was a huge thing. People, like whole villages would eat this bread that had this fungus on it. And that is the fungus that LSD is synthesized from. So the synthesis of it makes it like physically a safer kind of thing. People used to die from gangrene, but it was a common thing. So it was also interesting to me after like, you know, reading about a lot of mystics and being very captured by the medieval imagination, to then think of that with also a psychedelic dimension to it. It was like it's like catnip for me, do you know what I mean? So I was very attracted to it. And then I thought, like, what is it about it that I'm interested in? What is it about the psychedelic experience, this island that had like this impossible contamination, because actually you need very specific conditions for ergot to happen. It's like impossible. It was 450 years. But what I really liked about it was that it really was like a kind of locus of what I often try and create with my work, which is a history that is neither real nor not real, kind of. And there was this mythology that emerges from these islands called the Mayara, which were like these, I can only call them communist ghosts, women. And they basically flew from their islands and went to the mainland and would steal food from the rich and bring it to the island. And that's how they survived the ergot contamination that's how they survived like tripping for 450 years, was with, you know, by the grace of these witches that would steal. And they would paint their bodies in ointment, and they'd do these lavish banquets for everybody. And I was like interested in also this genealogy of a witch that isn't negative, you know, that is like a kind of part of a community as opposed to like banished from it. Yeah.
Because also, I think that what's interesting from my perspective in the way that you approach the psychedelic experience is that you seem to try to retrieve it from a very specific imaginary, which is, I would describe maybe new agey or very much linked to kind of well-being. And it looks like what you're trying to do with it is something a bit more collective. So I'm interested in also how you approach that in relationship to witchcraft and community.
So I grew up in a place called Goa, which was a really die-hard hippie place, and a lot of drugs were there. And around me, people were on acid a lot, and they were often the kind of impetus around, or if there was one, let's say, you know, if there was like a kind of reasoning behind it, was like, oh, acids these psychedelic experiences can make you evolve as a human being and kind of transcend a state, you know, like your consciousness can evolve. And it was all the narratives were very much centered around the self and like the kind of expansion and self-realization. And I tried very young because it was kind of around. And my first thing was just a total sense of collectivity. Actually, it was like the opposite. It was a realization of something that actually binds us and not separates us. And through that, I just wanted to see if there was a way to kind of extract some of these artifacts and put them at the service of a project that has a political perspective in it. And it's not just like, I went to take ayahuasca and I had ego death or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But that actually is like, okay, there are things that you see there or senses that you have there that like allude to a completely different way, you know, to living enigmatically, as I call it. Yeah.
And to me, this is the perfect transition to the last project. I won't say why, but let's just watch a 3-minute excerpt from My Bodily Remains, which is a film from 2023.
I am a still life, a painting, a photograph. I am cannibal, but I won't die. On my forehead, center left, a small black hole. It is a tunnel into and out of the world, circled by a ring of torn skin. The small veins visible under detonated flesh. A throbbing rivulet of fresh blood flows from it. Animal. Animal out. Child of separation, I kissed the sky. The sky kissed me. It is time to say goodbye. Where would we be kept? Who would be with us? How would we look? How would we look? What would happen to our history? How would we survive as rotting material? I worried sleepless till morning about how exposed it was. How alone. How fragile. And that it could not be handled respectfully enough. A corpse also needs a home.
This is actually one of the final scenes of the film, which is this collection of tableaus, in a way. Maybe to understand how you approach this new register, can you tell us about what type of speculation operates in this film?
I think the speculation that operates is this tension that I think many artists probably experience, which is one of being an artist and also being a citizen and also being part of a social contract and also benefiting, understanding that everything I love pretty much in the world and everything I do that I enjoy is possible because other people in the past fought for it and made that possible. So I think I felt, well, not felt, that's like stupid, I'm sorry. I knew that fascism was emerging again, and I felt like I needed to also speak a little bit more clearly about my ideas around that because, I think there's always been these two kind of like the Lumière and Méliès kind of school of how people think of politics. And one is like the speculative, magical register that's full of potential and full of kind of utopian thinking. And the other is like a kind of Marxist analysis of like the economic and social conditions that create the world. And one of the big, I guess, criticisms that people that work in the magical register get is that, like, what is the blueprint? Like, what is the roadmap to this better place? Imagining it is great, but it's only goes so far. So I wanted to try and slightly, I also want to be very, very humble about my aims. And, I don't think that an artist can do much about what's happening in a way. I think we have to do it together. But I don't think that like an artist can be like, this is the blueprint out of like genocidal capitalism. Do you know what I mean? I think it's beyond every one person or even 10 people. But I did want to start to have a more direct address in it and an awareness of the histories that I situate myself in. So some of the people that are quoted in that book of love that you showed are people like Lucy Parsons, who was a labor activist in 1870 something, you know, and she wrote incredibly about emancipation and abolition. She was an abolitionist. She was a Black American woman. And I wanted to say, like, oh, we are all contributing to this project, and we have to contribute to the thing that we will never experience, but we have to kind of think of it not as a politic, but more as a spiritual framework to live by, basically. So that was what I was trying to slightly, touch upon with this project, I think.
And I think that this is also kind of continues in the latest project that you worked on, which is The Dream and the Spell.
Yes.
With the Dream Radio.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit about this kind of 24/7 broadcast, which I really advise you to look at? It's dreamradio.net, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's always on. It's 24/7. There are interviews of artists.
It's not always on.
It's not. No. It was always on every time I went.
It is on. So basically, I don't know if we have a picture of.
Yeah, we have a picture of the project. Not of the radio.
Or maybe not. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was a giant statue that breathes and is asleep, and that part of the project is called the dream. The spell, sorry. So they're like under the spell. And there was a QR code, I'm sorry, I couldn't find a better way of doing it, on the plinth that you could scan, and it gave you access to the radio. But the radio only is on when the dreamer is on display, so to speak. But they're in Edinburgh at the moment, and that's why the radio is on. So the radio is on. We commissioned over 80 artists. We had like different kinds of commissions. Some of them were like major Moore Mother, Cecilia Vicuña, Cecile B. Evans did really kind of involved projects for it. And some people did voice notes, some people did playlists. It was like a whole kind of range of sonic engagement. And initially it was on for 6 weeks, and had also music and strange music things like music composed for ashrams in the 80s that I really liked that were in there. But also UbuWeb gave us access to the archive, so there were also like really seminal kind of sonic works by historical artists. There were books being read, there were radio plays from the 1940s. There was like really a huge range of content in it, and it was a kind of articulation of what that character is dreaming. But there was also very discursive parts as well. We did live conversations between like 4 different people that were from very different worlds, like a priest and a writer, an activist. So it was a really incredible experience to be able to do that. And it also made me realize like how fundamentally bad it is that all of our platforms of communicating like beyond, as we are now, like a radio station, are in the hands of people that are not aligned with any of our politics, really. And how expensive it is to run a radio station where you actually have, where you can commission people to write things for it or compose for it.
Hence the power of dreaming, which is what this person is doing. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tai, for being with us today.
Thank you.
And the conversation. Very interesting. We have a few minutes for questions from the audience. If you have any, I can live translate if needed. My colleagues have the mics also.
If I don't see questions, I'll ask a question, maybe. Like you actually, to make the connection between the beautiful performance we had before and your discussion, you put a very big emphasis on the word technology rather than technique, somehow. And I'd like to know like your take on that, the difference that you see between the two terms.
Not completely sure. I think technologies and technique are different things, maybe, to me. So technologies are ways that we can use objects or like printing, phones, and technique is how you do something, like techniques you use.
D'accord, so you don't make a
no,
specifically...
I don't make, no.
D'accord,
Sorry.
that's the question.
Yeah, it might be a different thing. Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's a language thing.
Yeah, it's a language thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's a language thing.
I had actually a question. Thank you so much for this talk. I wanted to ask in relation to superstition and magic. Obviously, house museums are kind of relevant in relation to this topic, and I had this wonderful experience to see you and your show at the Sir John Soane's house. And I just wanted to ask you to talk maybe a little bit more about this connection to a house museum and your interest in the house museum.
Yeah.
And if maybe also one day you're going to have your own house museum.
Oh, I'd love that, but I'm a poor person, so I don't think my house will ever be a museum. But
Maybe in the Cevennes.
maybe in the Cevennes, yeah. Maybe in my alternative community will become something like that. But I did a project for Cosmic House, which is a house museum. And that specifically resonated for me because it is a house that was built by Charles Jenks, who weirdly was very much in my mind for many years before this opportunity came up. That's actually where I met Susie as well. Yeah. Yeah. But when they asked me if I was interested in doing it, I was like beyond, it was a dream because I visited it and found both his writing and his work very exciting to me. But there was also something about the scale of a domestic space. Like you've seen from the pictures, a lot of the work is quite big, and it was very nice to work in the opposite scale, in a very small scale, which I had to kind of also find a way to make monumental. So I made an aquarium with a little architectural thing inside, and I put tiny blue shrimp to live in there. So they became part of this monumental kind of architectural environment as well. But there's something very different about making work in a place that was lived in, for sure. Like a kind of need to be in dialogue, I think, ethically as well, with the people that lived there once.
You're visiting.
Yeah, which we are anyway. Yes, yeah.
If there are no more questions, there is a question there.
Hi, I'd like to know a little bit more about your personal relationship to magic and superstition. You talked a little bit about your upbringing, but I guess it's quite present if you put it in your work, and you said it's a way for you to understand the world, to do your work. So, yeah, thank you.
I think, well, two things. I did grow up around a lot of, my aunt is very into doing rituals, let's put it that way. And I grew up around the kind of openness to it. My dad was very interested in like Jewish mysticism. A lot of people in Goa were very open to all these ideas that like now are more palatable, but even astrology in the 70s was seen as really out there. So like a lot of these things also shift. But I think for me, I feel that we are working, we're on a small rock, a little bit what the previous sermon was saying, which is we're on a small rock, we're living with very few resources in a way, in an absolute universe where all kinds of magics are there all the time. And we've chosen to live unenigmatically, basically, as a race, as a species. So magic for me is not outside of the natural, it's not outside of the everyday. It's something that is just there, and we're not engaging with because of the structures that we've built that are extractive, that like distance us from that. But I don't feel it's an elsewhere. Yeah.
There was another question there.
Non, c'était plus par rapport à la performance d'avant et je sais pas si c'est bon. Après alors. Ok.
If there are no more questions, maybe we can just thank Tai again for this conversation and her presence with us. Thank you so much, Tai. So great.